Welcome to Learning to Glow, a show about wellness, skin health, and self-development. I'm your host, Jess. I'm a mom, entrepreneur, and skincare expert. I'm so excited to share tips on how to achieve healthy skin and bring amazing guests in the field of health, fitness, aging gracefully, and personal growth. Let's explore all different ways we can take care of ourselves as women, both inside and out, to truly shine. So let's get glowing. Hello, and welcome to Learning to Glow podcast. I am your host, Jess. I'm so excited about our episode today. We have such an amazing guest. Her name is Brianna Rose. She is an industry-leading Kundalini Business Expert. She has 10 years of experience in successfully building impact-driven businesses, paired with her undying desire to make Kundalini mainstream. She was destined to revolutionize the online business and spiritual coaching industry. She's the creator of Light Leader Movement, which is filled with thousands of visionary women, entrepreneurs, and Light Leader Kundalini. We're going to talk more about that. A deeply transformational, modernized experience, blending both Kundalini and coaching that focuses on the practitioner becoming the guru. Through this practice, you are able to transcend limiting beliefs and seamlessly align with your natural rhythm of a success. Brianna and I had such an amazing conversation. She shared what Kundalini Yoga is and Kundalini energy. We talked about how she has modernized it in her life and how she teaches it with her students. We talked about listening to our internal wisdom and how when we get blocked, we cannot hear our own intuition and how important that is, especially if you have your own business. How breathing and meditation play a role into this in her amazing and unique program. We talk all about that. I can't wait for you to hear this episode. I learned a lot from Brianna. She is truly incredible. She is so wise, and I can't wait to share this with all of you. Here is our conversation. I hope you enjoy it. Welcome, Brianna. Thank you so much for being here with us.
I'm so excited to be here. Thanks so much for having me.
We're so happy to have you. I like to start all of my podcast episodes with a brief introduction. Tell us a little bit about yourself and your background.
Yes, of course. So my name is Brianna Rose, and I am a Kundalini business coach. Many of you probably have never heard of that before. I think I'm probably the first person to kind of create that title and market it and create a business surrounding that. And I know we'll dive into what Kundalini is in just a moment, but essentially I help spiritually based entrepreneurs get really clear on their intuitive gifts, get clear on who they are and what their message is, and then infuse that into their business. My whole mission in the world is to create more light leaders, people that are here to carve out a new path, to create a business that is impact driven first, and then the income comes second, and that are truly here to raise the vibration of the planet.
Oh my gosh. It's wonderful. I've never heard, like you said, I've never heard of somebody like this. And it just sounds so wonderful. I think, like you said, I think it's best to start with let's talk about Kundalini yoga. I know a lot of my listeners are aware of yoga. They have been to their local gym. They've taken a yoga class.
Sure.
And a lot of people think of yoga as the physical practice. And they think of the downward dog, the chaturangas. Yoga is so much more than that. And I'd like to just talk about yoga in general. Tell us a little bit about yoga, and then we'll talk about the differences and what in Kundalini specifically, what the differences are and how it makes it different. And we can just start there.
Sure. Yeah, definitely. So I too, for anyone that's listening, before I got into Kundalini yoga, I was someone that just would go to the gym and take a yoga class. I remember my first yoga experience was in college. I had to take it as an elective, and I was like, all right, cool. I'll try this thing. This seems fun as my gym, elective experience. And so I was kind of like probably many of you that are listening to this, where I knew that I needed to move my body. I knew that it was good for my body. I knew that I needed to stretch. And I think the first time I meditated was probably in a yoga class. I remember the first time I ever did Shavasana, I was like, what is this? Just laying here on the ground. I kind of like it. I'm a native New Yorker. And so that was the first time that I ever got really quiet. And then that was the tipping point. Then I got really curious, of course, so many of you probably have experienced yoga before and felt good in the class, but many of you also probably feel really good in the class and then don't do yoga again for another month or a year or 5 years. And so yoga essentially is an opportunity to experience yourself. It's an opportunity to get quiet. It's the union of the soul and the body and the mind. And I think for most people, when they think of yoga, it's just like you shared, the chaturangas, the sun salutations, all of that. I'm not trained in more of that traditional type of yoga, like vinyasa or hatha. I've experienced it, but it wasn't something that I felt that I needed to explore. So I can't speak too much to those lineages, but essentially yoga in general is about that combination and coming home to yourself and quieting the mind, listening to the body, and just being in that experience of yourself and not being in competition with other people in the classroom, really honoring where your body is at today. And so that's how I view yoga. And I think that, the first time that I took yoga was probably like 10, 15 years ago. And a lot has changed. It's way more mainstream now than it was even back then. And so I assume probably most people that have listened to this have heard of yoga or maybe even taken a yoga class before, but you probably haven't taken a Kundalini class, or maybe you haven't even heard of that before either.
Oh yes, I know. So I started in the gym doing yoga and I loved it. And I think the way you described it was so beautiful, and just sitting there and being with yourself, and it's kind of in a practice that you don't experience just from, like, say I'm going to take a HIIT class or lift
Yes.
weights. And I was so drawn to that, and I actually I really started doing yoga on a regular basis, and I did find a Kundalini class. And
Yes.
I forced my husband to come with me, and because
Mm,
I can tell you, it was such a different experience than anything
yes.
I'd ever done before. So maybe you can explain a little bit, like, what you would see in a Kundalini class, and a little
Mm,
bit more about how it is unique.
totally, totally. So I'd love to share like my first experience with Kundalini because I think it's so relatable. Like I just shared, I just had only taken like gym yoga classes, or like sometimes I'd get like a group on to like a local yoga studio and like would try it here or there. And so when I discovered Kundalini, I had first discovered it from Gabby Bernstein. She had wrote about it in her book May Cause Miracles, and I was like, okay, I'm going to try this thing. It ended up being that the only Kundalini yoga studio, I was living on Long Island at the time, the only studio was right next door to where I worked. And I was like, okay, this is kind of cool, synchronistic. I'm going to go check it out. And so I walked in thinking that it was going to be, downward dogs. It was going to be some sort of like, vinyasa flow. I figured it was going to be like some variation of that. I had no idea what I was walking into. And then I get in there, and as a typical New Yorker, I was dressed in like all black, kind of came from like my corporate job. And I walk in, and everyone's in all white linen with like white turbans on white sheepskin. And I was like, what is this? Is this a cult? What is going on here? And again, I walked in thinking that it might be like your regular yoga class. And I had a very intense dance background. So in my head, I'm like, I'm going to be fine. Like, whatever type of yoga this is, like, I've got this. Like, I've done yoga before. I danced for 15 years. We're going to be good. And I got my ass handed to me. Like, it was the hardest class that I've ever taken in my entire life. And it's not hard in the sense of like running a marathon is hard, or even like doing like a HIIT class is hard. It's hard because Kundalini itself, there's so many different layers to it that I know we'll get into, but essentially you are, really putting pressure on the subconscious mind through sequences of movements, mantra, and breath work. So you're holding postures for like an extended period of time. You might do that a little bit in like a yoga class, right? You might like hold the downward dog for a couple of extra breaths, but in Kundalini, you're holding a posture for 21 minutes. You're holding a posture for 31 minutes. Your arms are up over your head for 62 minutes, right? So there are these things that you just don't see. At least I haven't seen in any other form of yoga or really any other type of movement. And through holding those postures and those movements, you start to awaken the body, start to awaken the subconscious mind, and there's just this deep healing occurs. And what I have found to be so beautiful about Kundalini, what really drew me to it, is one, I love getting challenged. So Kundalini just challenged the heck out of me, of course. And two, it's a full body experience. Whereas I feel that most physical movement, most yoga classes are just about that, the movement. There is some meditation, there is some quieting of the mind, but Kundalini is really this full spectrum experience. In traditional yoga, or more traditional, I would say, that you would see in like yoga at the gym or yoga at school or just regular yoga studios, they focus on the 8 limbs of yoga, whereas Kundalini focuses on the 10 limbs. They add on 2 additional limbs, and you're hitting all of those limbs in one sequence. Whereas in Vinyasa or Hatha, they're focusing on like 1 or 2 limbs, and it's taking like 10 years to master all of those limbs together. Kundalini is like, cool, we're going to be really efficient. We're going to add on 2 more limbs, and we're going to do them all together in one posture. Let's do this. And so it's just a more energetically intensive type of experience, and also physically intense. But I will be clear, the way I teach it is different than Kundalini yoga and meditation as taught by Yogi Bhajan. That is the lineage that has been more dominant here in the West. And I actually created my own lineage and tradition of Kundalini that we call Light Leader Kundalini. That is less intense, more feminine based, and is appropriate and easy and accessible for all bodies to experience. And I know we'll probably get to that in just a moment, but essentially that's the differences between Kundalini yoga and what you might experience in any other type of yoga class.
That does sound intense. And it's interesting. You were
Yes.
saying like 32 minutes, 62 minutes.
Yeah.
Is there like thought behind the time? And then you had also mentioned limbs. I'm not sure what that is. Can you talk about that? And is that different than, like, I've heard of Kriyas? Is that
Yes.
different than that? Maybe you could talk about that a little bit.
Yeah. So in the more in Yogi Bhajan's lineage that has been here in the West, that many people, if you have taken a Kundalini class, it probably has been that type of class that was taught by him, or at least been trained through him. And the way he taught it was very restrictive and very, I feel, dogmatic. And it's like, you have to sit there for 3 minutes or 11 minutes or 21 minutes or 31 minutes or 62 minutes. And so there really isn't that much information. And that's why I created my own version of it, because there haven't been really that many studies on like, why do we keep it up for 11 minutes? Why do we keep it up for 62 minutes? He had his own reasons and why he said it, but it hasn't really been backed up or tested just yet. Maybe they're true, maybe they're not true. You could also look at numerology, right? We could look into the numbers of like what the number 3 means, or 11 means, or 62 means. The way I teach it is, you have to feel it in your body. I do like teaching it with the 3 minutes and the 11 minutes, because I notice a difference in the body, and I notice a difference between the 11 minutes and the 62 minutes. You start to feel different things. But I can't come on here and say like, we do it for this specific reason. There really isn't like science to back that up. It's more that it's just been something that has been passed down through the years, essentially. And so I encourage everyone, you don't have to do it for 3 minutes or 11 minutes or 21 minutes or whenever someone tells you to do. You could do it for whatever feels good in your body. Nothing horrible is going to happen. So that's one part. When it comes to the limbs, I won't say that I'm an expert in them and what they are, but essentially there's this person or a group of people, we don't know if it was an actual person or a group of people, that created the limbs like thousands of years ago. And essentially they are, when you think of a tree, there's all these different limbs. And it's said that if you practice all of those limbs, you will reach some sort of a level of, enlightenment and higher consciousness. And so if you Google it, you'll find way more information on that. But essentially it's just it's kind of like this way of living, how to have an elevated, enlightened life and how to be a better person. And so where Kundalini comes in is they add on 2 different limbs. They add on sound, because sound and mantra isn't really a part of those original 8 limbs. And then it also adds on the Kriyas, because the Kriyas weren't a part of the 8 limbs too. And so a Kriya, for anyone's like, what is that? A Kriya is a sequence of poses, posture, mantra, and breath work that you practice together in a specific sequence for a specific outcome. Having that dancer background, the way I think of this as, it's kind of like just choreography. That's what a Kriya is. It's choreography. And you're blending in some movements, some mantras, some breath work, mudras, which are hand postures, and you do them together in a specific sequence for a desired outcome. And so that's also one of the ways that Kundalini is different than other forms of yoga is there are limitless, there's thousands upon thousands of kriyas, but each one of them you're doing for a specific reason to feel something. So there's literally a kriya for anything and everything. There's a kriya for manifestation. There are kriyas for, career advancement. There's kriyas for communication, you name it. If there's something that you need help with, there is most likely a kriya for. And so what I have done in my lineage of Kundalini is traditionally the way it's been taught here in the West was there was a guru on the pedestal and he said, practice this kriya for this reason and don't ask questions. And for me, I'm someone that asks a lot of questions. And so when I first started learning about this, I'm like, but like, why do we practice that kriya for that reason? Like, I just want to know, like, why is it working in my body? Someone tell me. No one could tell me. No one was like, oh, this is the reason why. Everyone kind of was just like, listen, this is how the guru taught it, be quiet, like that's just it. And I was like, I don't know, that doesn't feel right. I feel like I need to know more. And through that, I really spent the last decade really working with Kundalini energy, understanding the energy channels of the body, and then creating this correlation between the energy channels and the kriyas and kind of giving substance and context and meaning as to why the kriyas are working, how they're working in the body, and what kriyas work well for your unique energy constitution. Because for some people, when they practice these kriyas, because they are rigorous, it might be too much on your body and then you don't feel good. And then for other people, you feel great. And so for me, I wanted to know, like, why does that happen? Why do the kriyas work for some people and sometimes, not other people? And also just in general, like, why are these working in your body? And so that's something that I really dive into with my students and what I've incorporated into my programs, because I think it's really important to know like what you're doing to your body rather than giving your authority and power, to someone outside of yourself. You should know what you're doing to your own body and what's happening.
Oh, that's so interesting. So I want to talk more about how you've kind of modernized
Sure.
Kundalini and made it your own, and how sounds like you can kind of customize and change what you would recommend for people based on their energy and where they're at. So tell me some more ways that you've kind of added your personal take to it and made it more so that it works for people based on where they're at and where their energy is.
Totally. I would love to do that. The little story behind that, because I think if someone has practiced Kundalini before, they might have experienced the same thing. So I just want to share a little story about this. The reason why I did decide to modernize it was because I was going to these classes and they were very rigorous and restrictive and dogmatic. And it just didn't feel right in my body to practice it that way. And my intuition was saying like, yes, like follow Kundalini, but like, not this way. And I was like, this is, God, I feel like I'm rebelling against something. Like I kind of felt like, oh, like who am I to go against the guru or what have you? So I encourage anyone, if something doesn't feel right in your body, trust that. Like no one knows better than you. And so what I started to do was just do my own research because I wasn't finding it from these teachers that were teaching it. No one could tell me like why the kriyas work or how they were created or why they were created or why it doesn't work in someone's body. And I was like, all right, this is like, I'm carving a new path. I have to go down this. And so I spent the last 10 years really studying the body, the energy system, and the kriyas, and then its relation to success and financial success and business building, because that's just my jam and what I do. But it can be used in any industry. And so essentially, the body has 12 main energy channels. And so when those channels are blocked, abundance is going to be blocked. And abundance can be like financial abundance, it can be love, it can be good health, right? Like there's so many definitions as to how we can define success or abundance. But essentially, if the energy channels are blocked, we are going to be blocked. They can become blocked from sitting all day at the computer, right? Just like not moving our bodies, but they can also become blocked from trauma, whether it's little trauma, little T trauma, or big T trauma, and just like everyday life, right? Because we are just humans that are just going through a crazy, wild human experience, especially over these last couple of years, right? And so our energy system can become blocked. And so no matter the vision boarding that we do, or no matter the meditations that we do, or the Reiki healing, we still might not be moving the needle in our business, in our life, because our energy system is blocked. And so the kriyas, the way I teach them, are sequences of these movements that you are practicing. And essentially, when you're getting your body into these postures, you're putting pressure on the meridian channels. You're putting pressure on the energy channels. And when you hold it for those extended periods of time, you're activating that meridian channel. And essentially, you're opening it up so that way the energy can flow. And so when the energy can flow, life can flow, you can manifest, you'll see the miracles in your life, all the good stuff can happen. And so through the Kriyas, essentially you are self-healing. It's kind of like you're applying almost like acupressure to your body, right? You're getting into these postures and you're holding them. And not going to lie, like it's tough sometimes, right? To get yourself into these postures, but we do have modifications and things of that nature. But sometimes it's tough because if the energy channel is blocked, of course, it's going to be tough to get your body into that. Of course, your mind and your ego is going to say, put your arms down. That's crazy. You're going to hold that for 21 minutes. You're nuts, right? The subconscious mind really starts to unwind. But essentially, you're creating like geometric patterns with your body that are putting pressure on the energy channels and opening them up. And so that's how I teach Kundalini. It's so people can really understand where they're blocked in their life, where do they want to be, and then we use the Kriyas essentially as energy medicine. And so when I work with people right now, I only work with group programs. So when I work with people in group programs, it's a little bit different than when I work with people one-on-one, but essentially they fill out an energy evaluation form. We figure out what energy channels are blocked in their body, and then we recommend a Kriya accordingly that will help them get to where they want to be. And then I also now certify people in this, so that way they understand essentially the wisdom of the body, how to speak to the body, what is the language of the body. And then we use the Kriyas to move the body in a specific way to open up those energy channels. So that way that person can move forward in their life and actually manifest. Because I know probably many of us, or many of you that are listening, have probably tried manifestation or heard of it. And you're like, okay, I'm thinking about the thing that I want. I'm trying to feel it in my body, but nothing's happening. Or like, I did the vision board or I did the new moon ritual and like nothing happened. And that was me too, until I figured out how to move energy in my body. And I think that that's the best gift and skill set that we can have as humans, is really understanding how to truly be embodied, how to truly understand what our body is trying to tell us, how to move energy in our bodies. Unfortunately, we're not taught that. We're taught how to think with our mind and overthink and overthink and overthink, but we're not taught what is our body trying to say to us, and like what is actually blocking us from point A to point B. How do we create that bridge to get there? And 99% of the time it's energy based, and then it's action steps, of course. But if we don't address the energy block, you can do all the action steps in the world and it's just not going to save you.
I love this. It really sounds like with helping to release some of the blockages, you can finally listen to your intuition, what you were talking about before.
Mm-hmm.
It's hard to actually know and listen if you're blocked. So you can't listen to yourself. You can't hear that voice inside of you. I think that's incredible. And you obviously, with the Kundalini and all of the things that you do, I know breath work is a big part of it. And I know that just from the class that I took, the breathing was like a big part of what we did and how we were using the breath work. I'm sure that's something that you incorporate with your practice and with your students as well.
Yeah, it's a part of the Kriya. So Kriyas are just sequences of different movement, mantra, and breath work. And so, yes, there's always going to be probably some sort of breath. Breath is great. So the way the Kundalini energy works, I realized we didn't speak about this. So for anyone's like, what even is Kundalini? Kundalini is different than Kundalini yoga or anything. Kundalini is actually an energy that lives within us. And this energy lives within us. It's within every single person in the world. So we all have this Kundalini energy, and essentially it lays dormant for most of us. But if you start hearing about Kundalini, like for those of you that listen to this podcast, it's a sign that the energy probably wants to awaken, right? There's a reason why you're listening to this podcast. There's a reason why you're just hearing Kundalini in general. And so this energy lives within us. It's located near the base of the spine. It's actually located between your navel center and the base of your spine. If you connect them, it creates a diagonal line. And in the center of that is where the Kundalini energy lives. And the Kundalini energy is coiled 3.5 times. And that's why many times you'll see Kundalini associated with the symbol of the snake, because the snake is coiled. I like to think of it as a diamond, and I'll tell you that why in just a moment. I never really resonated with the snake, just like wasn't a symbol that I aligned with. But essentially the energy is coiled 3.5 times. And so for most people, it just stays there and it stays dormant. But this energy is like pure feminine energy. It's birthing energy, it's creating energy, it's the energy that's created the entire universe. If you are, into that type of energy, it's like everything that we see in this world came from Kundalini energy. It's what created you and me and everyone in the world. And so you're walking around this like beautiful, powerful, creating energy. And so what we do with those kriyas and that breath work is essentially we're putting pressure on that energy so that way it can rise up. Because when it rises up is when we have that activation. It's when that energy can actually integrate with who we are. And so as we're putting pressure on it, this is why I think of it as a diamond. The more pressure the diamond has, the more it shines. And so the more pressure you put on that Kundalini energy, the more it's going to shine up. And so this energy is literally a light frequency. So it's a light energy that lives in the body. As you're putting pressure on it, it shines up through the body, through the energy system. It's rising up through your central spinal column, and then it descends out through your vagus nerve. So it's reaching every part of you. And the way that we can direct that energy is through the breath work. And that's why breath is so important. It's because you are literally guiding your Kundalini energy. Kundalini, if you Google it, it tends to have a bad rap, I think, because there's a lot of disembodied teachers that are teaching this. And there's just a lot of information about it. And there's, with there being a lot of information, there's a lot of good information and negative information. I will say Kundalini is probably the most natural thing that we can do in our body because it's what created us. It lives within us. But of course, there's just people that have taught it in like a not embodied way. And so if you see anything negative on the internet, just close it off and come back to this podcast and listen to this podcast, because this energy is so beautiful and so powerful. And as it's rising, it calls us to heal, because as we shine a light on something, we're also illuminating the darkness, right? We're like shedding light on that darkness. And so we all have some sort of darkness, right? We're human. So we have shadow and light. We have all these different parts to us. And so as that diamond is shining up, it's illuminating our darkness. It's illuminating those parts of us, like our limiting beliefs, our stories, our traumas. And so this Kundalini energy wants you to be the most like elevated, aligned, happy version of yourself. But in order to get there, you probably have some shit to go through, right? You probably have some healing to do in order to be that happiest version of yourself. And so as this energy is rising, it's illuminating that parts of you that need to be healed, that maybe you shoved away in the closet, a decade ago, and it's going to come out so that way you can heal it. Relationships might change, career might change, right? It's all about you aligning with this like most like happiest, peaceful, like elevated version of yourself. And so as people are going through that, if you resist it, it's going to get harder, because the energy is like, hey, you woke me up from my little slumber that was coiled and you wanted all of this. What's up? Like, why are you trying to push me away? And so a lot of people, I feel, the ones that have those negative experiences either didn't know how to work with the energy and weren't taught appropriately, but also might be running away from the lessons that, you're meant to have in this lifetime. So if you run away from the lessons are always going to find you, right? And so the more that you can lean into it, anything that's showing up for you, you have the capacity to heal. So it's showing up for you to actually help you. And that's what the Kriyas are doing. They're stimulating this energy. The energy is rising up. The breath work is guiding the energy to the healing and where the body is blocked in those meridian and energy channels. And then you're able to move energy and you're able to have a more happier, aligned, elevated life ultimately.
This sounds so incredible. I'd love to hear more about, now that you can see how some people can have the lessons come up and they're uncomfortable and they don't, maybe they run away from it, which would be such a shame to not be able to go through that and come out better on the other side. This is something that you kind of help your students process and work through. Is that right? I'd love to hear more about your program. And like, I do have a lot of people who listen to this podcast who are business owners. And I feel like, and we talked about this a little bit in the beginning, but how your take and the way you've sort of worked and updated this version is more feminine. I love that. And I think this is such a unique and powerful way to look at not just obviously your business, but your whole life. So I'd love to hear more about what you do in your program and like who it's for and all of that good stuff.
Yes. Thanks so much for asking. It's super fun. I love working with entrepreneurs because we are here to change the world. We are here to make the world better. We are here to innovate. And so I really see my role in your experience as the entrepreneur is helping you to really get clear on your gifts and who you are. So that way you can change the world. You can raise the vibration of the planet. And so the way Kundalini comes into that and why I brought Kundalini into that is I started off in corporate doing just, advertising and marketing, worked in Manhattan, had my degree in advertising, marketing, communications, lived that whole life, left, started my own business doing PR and marketing and graphic design. And what I started to notice was, and many of you might relate to this, is I would give a strategy to someone or I would do consulting with someone and they would get stuck and they wouldn't take action and they would be afraid and all their stories and fears would come up and then they would be afraid to like sell their services or receive money for their services, right? They just got so overwhelmed. And for me, this is before I knew Kundalini and energy. I was like, what the heck is going on? Like, I just gave you the $1 million strategy. Like, here you go, follow it, take action, right? I couldn't figure it out. I was like, what's going on? Then I had my own spiritual awakening. That's probably a story for another podcast interview, but I had my own spiritual awakening, discovered Kundalini. And what I started to notice was these energy channels that we all have. And when they're blocked, abundance can't flow. And what I started to do was connecting these different meridian channels to aspects of your business and how they interrelate. So if someone had a block on their water meridian channel, they're also going to be blocked in creating content for their business. If someone had a block on their wood meridian channel, they're not going to take action on the steps that I'm providing for them, and so on. And I was like, oh my God, this is it. I figured out why people aren't taking action, creating success. And so the way that we heal those meridian channels, as you all now know, is through the Kriyas. And so what I have done inside of my programs is we have correlated the Kriyas with different aspects of building your business. And that's what I teach, because I could give you the strategy all day long. I could tell you how to write the most magnetic piece of content or your $1 million program. But if you're not aligned with it, if you're not taking action on it, if it doesn't feel good in your body, you're never going to sell it, right? And so we have to address the energetic component of success first and clear that. So that way you can show up fully for yourself when you're taking action. I fully believe that your business is a reflection of your current energetic state. So if your business isn't growing, it doesn't mean do the Facebook ads. It does not mean do more of the action. It means you have to go within and you have to figure out what part of you is blocked, why is it blocked, and how to remove that block. And so I started doing that with my students. Just as a test. I was doing one-on-one clients back in 2016, 2017. And they were just rapid fire, seeing results in their business. They were scaling, they were hitting these bigger numbers. And I was like, oh shit, I'm onto something. This thing works. And then I came out with my one-on-one mentorship program back in 2017 and my business scaled. It just grew and expanded organically without paid ads. And I was like, okay, again, I'm like, it's working. And then I had so many one-on-one clients. I just had this moment where I was like, I want to reach more people. There's only so many hours in the day. So there's only so many people I could reach each week. I had a wait list for months in advance. I was like, let me create this group program so I could reach more people. And that was the Ascension Academy, which is my signature program. It's turning 5 this month. So I've been doing it for 5 years. I'm the Pet 17 collectives of it, helped hundreds of students across the globe. And essentially it's for people that are spiritual. You don't have to be a healer or a coach, that type of spirituality. I've helped artists, accountants, bookkeepers, all of that. But essentially how to really understand how to build your business through the lens of energy first, strategy second. And then people loved that so much and they were seeing so much success in that they were like, Brianna, teach us what you're doing. And then I created my certification program to certify people in those modalities too.
That is so incredible. So first of all, we have to have you back for the Spiritual Awakening podcast.
Yes.
We're going to have you back. You're so incredible. I absolutely loved this conversation. I think people are going to really want to know more. So please tell us where they can find you, and we'll link everything in the show notes as well.
Perfect. So I love being on Instagram. So please come say hi, slide into my DMs at I am Brianna Rose. Would love to meet and connect with you. And then also I have a free Facebook group called the Rising Light Sisterhood. It's essentially a sisterhood for spiritual entrepreneurs. There's over 100 free trainings inside of that space on energy, strategy, messaging, Kundalini, and everything in between. So it's just a great place to be as well.
I love it. I will. Yes, please follow her on Instagram, and I'll make sure that all of this is available for all of you listening.
Perfect.
And thank you so much. This was absolutely wonderful. I so enjoyed it. You are incredible. And you're
Thank
coming back.
you. Yes, I would love it. Thanks so much for having me. I really enjoyed this conversation.
Great. Thank you. Thank you for listening to this week's episode. Please subscribe and review so we can reach more people who want to learn to glow alongside us. See you next time.